This is Josh from Cattle Decap, and you're watching RichardMetalFan.
Hey, what's up, guys? Episode 139 of RichardMetalFan Interviews, here outside of the Variety Playhouse in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm here chatting with Josh Elmore from Cattle Decapitation. How are you doing today, Josh?
I am doing wonderful. How are you?
Can't complain.
Very good. We'll be here until it starts raining.
Yeah. I know you're on this awesome tour right now with the Decibel Tour with Dark Funeral, 200 Stab Wounds, and Black Braid. So how's the tour been? The most typical interview question ever.
But a reasonable one. Turnouts have been really good, and all the bands have been killing it top to bottom, so no complaints here. Venues are nice. Today is the first time we played at Variety Playhouse here in Atlanta, but it seems to be quite the classy joint, so we're happy. So bands start here in a couple hours, and we'll just ride it on to the end.
Awesome. So kind of what I want to do is I want to talk about like your journey as an artist from where you starts now and do a rundown of your discography, as well as I want to talk about the new Cattle Decap album.
Sure.
But take me back to young Josh Elmore. So what were like the first bands that got you into metal and what made you want to start playing guitar?
Well, I was the kid that, like, whenever you got in the car growing up, I said car, that's my upper Midwest thing coming through there. It was just turn on the radio, and it was just at that time, Central Illinois, like, top 40 radios, so you had, this is early 80s, so you had, hard rock was emerging a little more in popular radio in that sort of like landscape, I guess you could say. So, what was popular then? Well, my mom really liked Christopher Cross's for his iconic record with Sailing on it and Ride Like the Wind and all that. So she listened to that all the time, and she also listened to a bunch of 70s soul and the typical. Well, now she's older, but older white lady like Neil Diamond, Johnny Mathis, and all that kind of stuff. So I didn't hear that as much more. I heard Neil Diamond, but a ton of like Christopher Cross and that sort of stuff. So that sort of AM gold radio landscape, kind of implanted itself. And then in the 80s, when hard rock started coming in, the first two, they were cassettes, but the first two cassettes or records I ever bought were 1984 Van Halen and Night Ranger's Midnight Madness. So just, total radio, good time, hard rock, that whole thing. But then also later, I think maybe a year after that, I remember my mom was, like, we were having like work done on one of our car or something like that, and Rat's Round and Round was echoing out of the bays where they were working on the car, and so I just sat there by the bay staring and listening to what they were had playing. And so then I started, we'd go to the grocery store and I'd save up money or whatever from doing like basically farm work, because I was a farm kid, and buying like Hit Parader and then Circus and Hot Shots, and then later they had Power Metal, which was Hit Parader's heavier. It was
those magazines.
Yeah, it wasn't Power Metal like today's Power Metal definition. It was like Slayer, Venom, Exodus, more thrash bands and heavier, more intense metal bands, kind of proto-early death, sort of pseudo-death metal bands. And I just got into that, and I was fortunate. I grew up like 35 miles away from a Big Ten college town. So, of course, it had record stores for the college students and, for that population base. So I would go and just spend whatever money I had on, tapes or whatever, and later CDs. But, I'd buy these music magazines and look in the back of the magazines where there were the cheap, like, 1/8, 1/16 of a page ads where you could send away for music or whatever. These usually look like something someone wrote or like drew in study hall, and I'd just send away for stuff, or I'd buy stuff at these record stores. So that's where I got into like the progression was from hard rock to like regular heavy metal, buying like those K-Tel compilation cassettes, and then into thrash, which went into death metal, and then after that, like, since it was a college town, there was a lot of like, I don't want to say not indie music, but independent music. So there was a ton of stuff that, wasn't under the metal banner, that was really kind of cool and weird sounding. You'd go in these record stores and they'd be playing like the Butthole Surfers or, I don't know, John Wayne. That's kind of not a very, it's kind of a deeper reference there, but stuff like that. And I was like, what is this? And so I'd buy these records of this kind of obscure bands that were these outsider bands. So I'd be hearing like, I grew up top 40, and then it was, the metal progression, heavy metal, thrash, death metal, whatever, early, second wave black metal. And then this sort of weird independent stuff. So it was this amalgamation of all those things together when I started trying to play in bands when I was in my mid-teens, that kind of came out playing-wise. It's just feed this, and then this is the, whatever becomes the output. So I had a lot of that, and then I started getting into like more grind, and kind of there was like crusty grind and crusty, not crust punk necessarily, but like just that stuff's super intense. Disrupt, Destroy, State of Fear, those kind of bands, Asuk, stuff like that. That has a DIY element to it. or a DIY sort of like, I guess, sort of ethical approach. But the music is pretty much metal, or at least that stuff. So, and then on till today, I joined Cattle 2000 August 2001, and then been on that since the entire time.
And I'm always curious because I saw on Metal Archives, I believe your first band was called My Lie.
Me Lie, but that was actually my second serious band. I had
7,000 Dying Rats.
That I did that during the Me Lie period too. Me Lie started in '96, went to '99. 7,000 was a band that started in like '91 or '92, but I didn't join until '97. And I was in that until probably late 2000, and then I moved out of state. So
and then you did that Sound of No Hands Clapping in 2001.
Yeah,
that's a pretty good album. I listened to it.
Yeah, we were on Sound of No Hands. Myself and a couple of the other guys from Eli were on Sound of No Hands Clapping, and then we had a couple songs on Fanning the Flames of Fire, the album previous to that. But that record had a million different musicians on it, and so we kind of came in at the 11th hour on that. Yeah.
But then, of course, you joined Cattle in 2001. So how did you get to know like Travis and everybody at the band at that time?
I met Travis, like Me Lie, the band you mentioned. We were touring, and we'd done a couple tours with the band The Locust, of course, this sort of, sister band to Cattle Decapitation. And the three-piece version of Cattle was we played at this house. The bass player from Locust would have shows at his house in his living room, and my band played there, and Cattle played there, and I met him then, and that was probably like 98 or something like that. Maybe 99, but probably 98. So yeah, that's how I met him, and it was kind of like, oh, hey man, just brief kind of meeting. And then when the Locust played in Chicago, where I was living, probably I want to say maybe late 99 or something like that. I remember taking David Astor, their Locust drummer, and Gabe Serbian, who was playing guitar in Locust at the time, before he switched to drums later, taking them out to eat after the show, and they were like, just kind of, hey man, what are you doing? What's the next plans for Eli? And I was like, well, we haven't played in a while, and everyone seems to be kind of going in their own different direction. I'd love to continue it, but writing's on the wall with that sort of thing. And he's like, oh, you should move to San Diego, and we'll start a rad band together. That's a direct Gabe quote. And so eventually it did end up moving there, and we didn't start a band together, but over the course of maybe like 6 to 8 months, I tried out for Cattle a couple times, and they wanted a second guitar player. So eventually I either wore them down, or they got desperate or something and asked me to start playing with them. And then Gabe at that point, this is probably August of 2001, I think we had 2 practices, maybe with 2 guitar players, me being the second guitar player. Gabe, Locust was getting super busy at that point. David Astor quit Locust maybe 6 months previous or something, or maybe a little longer, and Gabe had switched to drums. So it was just a 4-piece. But Locust was getting extremely busy and very popular. So he kind of approached it. He's like, guys, I love all of you. This kills me, but you have this other guy here that can cover guitar stuff. Why if you guys are getting attention and starting to have more, sort of a busy element to Cattle, why would I hold you back and have you wait for me to come back from tour when we're going to be touring all the time? So he kind of handed over the reins to me, and I was the only guitar player for the next 16 years or so. Yeah. So it was just a 4-piece, from then on. And then, Bell joined, 2018, and there we go,
Yeah. But tell me about, your first album with Cattle, To Serve Man. I know last year was the 20-year anniversary of that. So were you, nervous at all, joining Cattle and recording To Serve Man?
Well, I think any band, you're kind of coming in, especially when they have such an established lineup, and, when I joined, they were probably 85 to 90% through writing To Serve Man. So I got maybe a couple riffs on the record, and maybe a couple little guitar parts that were, some solos and a couple layering parts. So, I just basically had to learn an album really quickly and try to get it as tight as I possibly could, and then record in April, So I joined in August. We got signed to Metal Blade early 2002, and then the record came out we recorded in April, I'm pretty sure 2002. So it was a kind of a whirlwind sort of thing. So of course there was nervousness on, not wanting to disappoint them and to play as best as I could and just get in there and do it. But, I'd recorded a bunch of other bands, but this was the first time that it was it wasn't just setting up and all of us doing the recording until it was as good as we could. And I didn't have to go into a studio super late at night because that's the only way we could afford it. This was there's a budget for this. We're going to do everything separately. and okay, it's just me playing guitar to the drum tracks, which I was used to just staring at people and having that, so that was a bit different.
Right. And I still think it's a great album. Like, the songs are pretty much short and right to the point.
Yeah.
Y'all just didn't bullshit.
The longest song is like 3 minutes something.
I still like, one of my favorite songs is Testicular Manslaughter.
Yeah.
It's a fucking sick song.
We should start playing that again.
Yeah. I hope you're playing it
Yeah,
tonight.
we played it. It's like we played it every show for like, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, and then we're like, okay, we got to take a break on that one. And then maybe it's been peppered out throughout the years. But I don't know, we have a headlining tour coming up this fall that we're going to try to bring back, do a lot more Terrasite songs, of course. But I want to kind of dip into the historical, sort of past of Cattle and do maybe a couple old songs,
nice.
From that era.
Yeah, nice. And tell me about your next album that you were on, Human Manure.
That was.
Did you feel like more comfortable? After being in Cattle?
Yeah, because I was at that point, at that time, after Serb-Man David Astor was no longer in the band, and then Mike Laughlin joined in 2003, so May or so. So it was pretty much him kind of being the new person and kind of feeling things out, and myself and Troy Oftedal, our former bass player, we just had a bunch of riffs that we threw back and forth for Humanure. So I don't know. That record, I think, is definitely, it's a transition record between the more straight ahead Serb Man stuff and then Karma Bloody Karma, which is a little more like out there, I guess you could say. So it's definitely a transitional record. There's a few good songs on that record, but you can definitely tell we're kind of trying to get our footing. I think we could that's been a discussion in our band for a long time. I think because those records, I'd say up through Harvest Floor, were not recorded with a click. It's hard because we play to a click now, and the last 4 records have been to a click. We'd have to really get our front of house guy to go in and sit there and write a click to a lot of those songs, which some of the tempos are kind of
a nightmare.
Yeah, because some of the tempos are a little liquid, shall we say, just because of the nature of things. So it'd be kind of hard for him to do that. But I don't want to say that's the only chance we'd play some of those songs. But I'd like to do them. I think it'd be cool. I think there is a group of people who are, have been fans for a long time that would really enjoy hearing some of that stuff. And, some of those songs aren't really not these big feats of technical brilliance to have to relearn. So, we could probably learn those pretty quick, even
nice.
Bell and Ollie could hammer those out pretty quickly, easily. I know they could.
Yeah, and then the next album, Karma Bloody Karma, I love that album, and I feel like it's a lot more darker than Humanure is. Is that what kind of the direction you wanted to take?
Yeah, I think that's where we started. You hear that kind of later with Harvest Floor too. It's a lot more. Things took this is going to sound weird. Not an emotional turn. That sounds overly dramatic, but they took a darker turn. I think we were really at that time, all of us kind of getting into the sort of dark ambient side of black metal, and so you can definitely hear that on a few of the sort of transition tracks, or how we, this at the end, the last track and stuff like that. So it's very reflected in that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
so,
I know you also played with an EBO for the first time on that album. But
yeah.
Where did the idea of that come to be?
Well, it's I think I'd always been messing with them, but it wasn't something I'd ever applied to my playing. Seriously, it's more this kind of a neat effect. It had a ton of delay to it. It's just really, a bowed sound, But I think I was wanting to add all these sort of layers. That's where I started really adding layers. I did in the previous albums, but that was the first album where it was okay, I'm adding a ton of stuff. So the EBO is a great thing to just have this sort of bass, just kind of background note that you can swell and bring in and out, and just adds a good, ambient vibe to stuff. So I think it's a really sort of elementary exploration into that sort of effect for me. But that's kind of the first time I started using it. And then by Harvest Floor I had it, and then by the last, say Monolith through present, I've kind of, I don't say it's a staple, but it's on a lot of stuff, especially all the bumpers and ambient stuff, or any of the, even on the most recent record, Just Another Body. It's people are oh, there's strings on that. I'm no, that's all guitar. It's just done with an EBO, so it gives it that real sonorous, bowed sound.
Yeah. And then the next album, Harvest Floor,
Mm-hmm.
I love that album. I feel like you, as a next step in Cattle, you kind of went more of a progressive direction, especially on Gardeners of Eden.
Yep.
How did that album come to be?
That was, I think, our record where we really wanted to. We don't. I don't know. I don't want to say we don't do this anymore, but I think we were almost kind of trying to prove ourselves. It was our first record with Dave McGraw.
How did he join?
Mike, our former drummer. He left the band when we were mixing Karma Bloody Karma. So we had maybe like 8 months where we had to have fill-in drummers and all that. We didn't have anyone. But then we got asked to do Summer Slaughter in 2007. So he came back for that tour and maybe helped us a little bit other than that because he was still living in San Diego at that point. But we, after he left, we were kind of like, during that time, we were literally looking at Dave. But Dave was living in Seattle, and he was in a band called Sleep Terror. So we played with them at a couple little mini fests, and we're always like, oh, hey, man, if you ever got any time, want to hit us up, please. So we kind of started, putting the feelers out there for him. And then we were asked to do this, it was Death by Decibels tour, which is at the end of 2007 with Vader, Malevolent Creation, and I think Vela Maya was on that too.
Oh, the bill.
Maybe Abigail Williams too. At that time it was like, these two veteran bands and then these up-and-comers or whatever. So Dave helped us out with that, and then he had joined officially at the beginning of 2008 and moved to San Diego, and then we started writing for Harvest Floor. So that helped his abilities, his drumming ability kind of really enhanced that record. And then we were just trying to do stuff that's like, let's make this both batshit and just kind of like a lot more, not technical for the sake of being technical, but just a really kind of busy album. And you can hear it. It's a shit ton of notes on that record. Yeah. Whereas I think the next record, Monolith, we started almost as
pretty much the album that got me into Cat.
Yeah, it's a lot of people too. Yeah, we kind of pulled back a little bit. We're like, okay, yeah, we can do all that stuff, but we want this one to be a little like more streamlined sounding, less just like, yeah, wheels are going to fall off at any time sounding, and just make it like, here, we're going to make X amount, however many you end up writing for the record, 10, 11, whatever, solid, just like, here's some songs, and it, like, not that we weren't trying to write the best music we could before, but I think that was the very concerted effort to be like, who cares what other bands are doing? Let's not try to like go, oh, we can play fast and technical too. Screw that. Let's just, if it's fast and technical, great. If it's slow and technical, it's slow and just caveman, that's fine too. Let's just make the best songs we possibly can with our, our sort of field of influences, and then the talent we have, of each member and everything like that. So let's not care about, let's please ourselves by writing the best songs as possible.
It's still a great album. Like, I remember hearing like Forced Gender Reassignment, especially like the video, which was freaking insane. And
that did a lot for us.
Hearing it from one of my favorite YouTubers, Infidel Amsterdam.
Oh yeah.
I remember like him made a video talking about you guys and stuff, and I was like, he didn't like it, but then I was like, and then I liked it, so it's cool.
Yeah, it's funny, we saw him, I want to say 2016 at a fest in the Netherlands, and we ended up talking to him. It was either the fest in the Netherlands, or we may have seen him at like Metal Days or one of those. But either way, we saw him and had a conversation with him and stuff, and ended up like not coming to an understanding. That sounds like there was some sort of beef. There wasn't, but just kind of like
misunderstanding.
Yeah, and we ended up like this mutual respect for one another, and it's totally cool.
Yeah, shout out to you, Ed, if you're watching this.
Yeah, exactly. So we were glad to do that, and have a nice little conversation.
Hell yeah. And then moving on to the Anthropocene Extinction, I love the album. It's probably my favorite album of you guys. It's probably my favorite album from 2015. So what was that like, going from Monolith to Anthropocene?
I think it's of the later period Cattle records, it's one of the darker ones, even though, I think Death Atlas was sort of built as, it's this really dark emotional record, which it is. But Anthropocene is kind of like, I almost feel like it unfairly gets overshadowed, because Monolith really, people jumped on there,
kind of like you guys' Black Album.
Yeah, well, and the people jumped on with like, oh, I love Death Atlas. It has this epic quality to it. Oh, Anthropocene's cool. I think I've heard it a couple times. It's like, that one to me is like, it really is just a lot more aggressive than people give it credit for, and it has a lot, but it also has a lot of these sort of, I don't want to say production techniques, but us exploring, kind of more grandiose production elements that Dave Otero really kind of helped us with on that. Yeah. So it's not that it's glossed over or people like, ignore it, but it's like, I think it's kind of unfairly pushed to the side a little bit relative to either Mono or Death Atlas.
Yeah, and I remember first seeing you guys on that album cycle. I think you did that tour with King Parrot, Dark Sermon.
Yep, 2015.
Right, I think I've seen every Atlanta show you've done since then.
Yeah, I remember playing in that show was at the Small Room. That was in Purgatory.
And I remember I freaking got dropped on my head and almost died.
Well, let's hope not.
Yeah,
you're talking to me now. So
I know my friend was making fun of me, and I was like, "Fuck you."
Yeah, it's like I could have been in a wheelchair and like steering with my tongue for the rest of my life. So. Thankfully, that did not happen.
Yeah, and then moving on to Death Atlas, I love the album. I know it was the first album with Bell and Ollie.
Yeah.
So what was that like, working with a second guitarist and now having two guitars in the band?
It allowed, it's another writer, another contributor, new contributors, I should say, not just singular person, and it allowed me as a, I don't want to say production techniques, but us exploring, kind of more grandiose production elements that really, kind of helped us with on that. So it's not that it's glossed over or people like, people jumped on with like, oh, I love Death Atlas. It's like, that one to me is like, it really is just a lot more aggressive than people give it credit for, and it has a lot of these sort of, I don't want to say production techniques, but us exploring, kind of more grandiose production elements that really, kind of helped us with on that. So it's not that it's glossed over or people like, people jumped on with like, oh, I love Death Atlas. It's like, that one to me is like, it really is just a lot more aggressive than people give it credit for, and it has a lot of these sort of, I don't want to say production techniques, but us exploring, kind of more grandiose production elements that really, kind of helped us with on that. So it's not that it's glossed over or people like, people jumped on with like, oh, I love Death Atlas. It's like, that one to me is like, it really is just a lot more aggressive than people give it credit for, and it has a lot of these sort of, I don't want to say production techni all those layers that I was doing on past records that I either had to choose a layer or just not do them because it was only me. Yeah. Now it kind of freed me up to like be a lot more not wanting, but just sort of like, oh, there was an appropriate, layer I could put in. I was able to do that and not have to think, oh man, but for live, it's just me. It's going to sound weird if that part's not there, because people understandably want to hear as close to the record as possible.
Yeah, don't want to use backing
exactly.
tracks.
So it allowed me to go, oh, okay, well now I can do that. So I think Death Atlas is a little less on that. Is Bell and I playing a lot of there's harmonies here and there, and I was doing layering, but it was a lot more unison. Whereas Terrasite is like 2/3 of the record we're playing different stuff.
Yeah.
So it's a little more like, oh, even though people, it's weird, like when people say, oh, there's 2 guitars and I don't know if I'm hearing this, and it's like, well, not everyone's going to do like harmonized leads. That's what they think. Oh, I hear 2 guitars. It's like, well, no, there's a rhythm and there's like this ambient layering stuff. That's obviously 2 guitars. Yeah. So it's not a bone obvious thing, but it really helps give the newer music a more cinematic sound, which is kind of, this is just me personally. That's kind of what I want. I want this super disturbing, emotional, brutal cinema quality to the stuff.
It is a great album, like Bring Back the Plague, One Step Closer to the Edge of the World.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a lot of people say it like it came out in 2019. It almost feels like you all predicted the pandemic.
Yeah, that's it. But the song's about the bubonic plague, so we're just kind of like, well, we'll take that, but that's not. It was written. We recorded that record, I think June, July 2019. That song was written probably late 2018.
Yeah, I know some bands that had albums written that came in 2018 or so that came out in 2020. I feel like it also has like different context and meaning now.
Yeah, exactly. And some of those poor bands were like, they had written the albums and they didn't get recorded, or it was based on how things were going, and they got released at the height of the pandemic, and they're like, well, we can't tour for this. So is this like a lost record, So that sucks. Ours came out end of November 2019, so it had some elements of lost record, but we were still able to, do some touring on it. We did a headliner at the beginning of 2022. We did that Amon Amarth tour at the end of 2022 as well. That was kind of like our farewell for that album cycle, and we were in Europe last summer doing the festivals and some one-offs, so that was touring for that. It wasn't the amount of touring we'd have liked to have done for the record, but, standing here right now and seeing the way everything kind of shook out, it's like, oh, okay.
Awesome. And then the new album, Terrasite, I love the album. So
Thank you.
What was that whole recording process like?
Well, it's different because this was the first record. Okay. 2 out of the 5 of us live in San Diego. Bell and Travis live in San Diego area. Travis is in Escondido, which is north of town, maybe half an hour, and Bell lives in San Diego proper. Dave had been living in Seattle since 2016. So for writing a Death Atlas, he would kind of commute down once a month. And Ollie, he lives in Montreal. So we almost had to send him stuff, or like, oh, here's how this song's looking, come up with some bass parts for it, or see what you think, and, tell us yay or nay on stuff. And then over the course of, I was living in San Diego up until probably July 2020. And then I moved, my girlfriend's Serbian, so I was living in Serbia for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
And the writing for Terrasite was this commute. I would have to go back and forth. We'd set up once a month. I'd come back for 3 or 4 days. Dave would come back. We'd come down and we'd all meet, pound out as much material as we could, and then we'd go back and kind of do our homework when we were away. So that was the additional element of, oh, now here's this thing. So, but it got done. We recorded it May, June 2022, and yeah, it's just funny. It's actually, when we went into writing it, it was like, okay, let's just do songs. No interludes, just songs.
Yeah, just get to the point.
And we were thinking, oh, okay, well, it might not be as long as Death Atlas, and it ended up being longer, I think, by a minute or two. And it's just songs, so okay.
Yeah, and how's the overall reception been for the album? Are you pleased with it?
Absolutely. There's, if you scroll through 400, 500 YouTube comments, there's a couple negative, oh, I was expecting this, or I don't like this. Okay, fine. But for the overwhelming majority, they're all positive. Enough where it's kind of off-putting, in a good way, of course. But, that just kind of puts more pressure on us for the future to which we would do regardless, but just keep expanding our sound and look, take slight little detours and look at other options on things and just try to get, make the most engaging, interesting, but memorable music that we can for our band and within our style.
All right. And did you wanted to try something new on Terrasite that you haven't done previously?
Well, okay, when we started talking about writing the record, we kind of did the informal sit-down over burritos probably, because why not?
Yeah, why
and,
not?
yeah, it's cattle we're talking about here. And was like, okay, what do we want to accomplish? And, Dave came in, his ideas, he was like, I want to make things a lot more rhythmic. I want to have, everyone knows we can blast all day and be as fast, as we want to be. But he goes, I want to have a lot more groovy, not groove metal, but just a lot more, headbangy kind of heavy parts that, all the strings and his kick drums lock up. It's kind of just super tight, sounding, and just things heavier in a more traditional metal way.
Yeah.
And then Travis came in saying, kind of like what I'd mentioned before, he's like, I just want songs. Like however many we come up with, whatever, songs. That's it. I'm not going to do the bumpers and, the transitions or interludes. And then my kind of 2 cents was that I was like, well, I really like the sort of ambient sort of guitar cinematic sort of stuff that I'm doing. If I could explore that a little bit more, as long as it's not forced in and it doesn't seem to be intrusive just for the sake of doing it, that it complements the song, I want to do a lot of that. So I think all those things were realized. It's a lot more rhythmic of a record that Dave wanted. It's a lot more concise. I mean, it's not concise, it's just a lot of songs, that Travis had wanted, and I did a lot of layers on the stuff that doesn't sound like a guitar, but it's a guitar, that it's people. It sounds like a keyboard almost, or something, or strings, but it's guitar.
Yeah, like I mentioned with the Harvest 4, I feel like he went a lot progressive, and I feel like it's progressive with this album, but he also had a lot of melodic elements to it. Is that like something you want to continue on future albums, or is there like other elements for Cattle Decapitation?
I don't know. We kind of very loosely discussed. I mean, because we're not, this album just came out, so we're not like our heads are not into like, okay, I got all these riffs. I mean, I'm sure all of us have riffs that we've been kind of fiddling with that we want to present at some point in time.
Yeah.
But I mean, I was kind of thinking like, well, I mean, this kind of is the long game sort of thing, but I think we can do one more record that's like the same type of focus we've been doing. I don't mean the same style or like let's repeat anything, but just like that same kind of writing scenario and that type of direction. But we're fortunate enough, provided that record is received well or whatever, to be able to do kind of whatever we want, thankfully. So, I mean, that's a privilege, to be in that situation. So, I mean, I would like, it may not be the smartest, business-wise, or, for, because there's people that are going to want to hear, I want to hear these choruses, I want to hear this, I want to hear Travis do this voice, and, he's going to do whatever creatively. But yeah, exactly. But I would like, it'd be cool to do just a super brutal record. Like, there's obviously a lot of replay value, and the songs are, hit you at the right place, but just stuff that's like, sounds like, trees getting shredded, just super brutal. Might be kind of fun to do that. Or just try to do like, screw it, guys, let's just do 11 bangers. Let's just cut to the chase. No grand, compositional stuff. Let's just, bang, 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 jukebox hero stuff.
Yeah.
If we can even do that,
Yeah, who knows, man? It could happen.
Yeah.
But I just love how you just stay true to Cattle's sound, but you still definitely experiment. You just don't want a Cattle album to sound like a Cattle album.
Yeah, because then you're just
try to experiment. I feel like you guys are like the most original sounding death metal band ever.
Well, it's like I think that we're saving it. Yeah, I mean, we there's like always like little bits that you hear in like records, little bits of elements that like later you hear more fully realized in like the next one. So, maybe the next record will be a lot more all rhythmic and all cinematic. I don't know. We don't have any idea yet. So, and usually you don't really know what the record's going to sound like until you get about halfway to 2/3 through writing it. You're kind of like, oh, here's something taking shape. I see the direction. Otherwise, it's like, okay, I hope this is cool. Hope we're on the right path here,
Yeah.
So it's a lot of, I mean, like any band, it's not like this is a unique thing at all, but it's just like there's a lot of apprehension. There's a lot of, I don't want to say insecurity because that implies like, not what we want to say, but it's just like a lot of, like any musician, you're just like you want to do creatively and the best you can, and just like, I hope people like it,
Yeah.
If they don't, then, well, this is, we're being honest to ourselves, so we are not at fault. It's just more of like the winds of, the fickle public tastes or whatever.
Anyway, got a couple more questions
Sure.
for you. I want to talk about like your guitar playing.
Yeah.
Do you ever are you like in music challenge, like experiments with music theory? Like I'm playing with this scale or this kind of chords and stuff?
Oh, like just try to get like kind of outside playing, you mean? Like as far as like
that, or just like, do you apply it to like the songwriting and stuff?
I mean, it's weird because I kind of was like when I was talking about like growing up with certain types of music, I do have this sort of weird slurry of like like I said, AM gold mixed with 80s hard rock, mixed with grind and death metal and black metal, and then a lot of, because I lived in Chicago for many years, a lot of avant-garde Chicago no wave, which is like really clashy, clangy, dissonant, abrasive for the sake of being abrasive stuff, and it's all in this sort of blender. So as far as like if there's like melodic choices or scalar stuff that within, like if you're soloing or if there's like a melodic layer, I just try to go with, yes, there's obviously theory involved. That's almost where you start and then see where you can go, not for the sake of doing this, but just like that's your pattern, that's your template, and then you kind of try to see what sounds best. Sometimes doing something that's wrong sounds right, and sometimes it's like stay that course and okay, yeah, that's you're operating within these sort of scale or mode patterns within whatever this chord progression or the chord I don't want to say allows, but sort of pseudo dictates. But then moving outside of that might work too. But then sometimes I just want to write like sad sack sounding stuff,
Yeah.
And then those things kind of write them. I don't say write themselves, but it's just like you feel where to go with it. You do. It's not like you have to really hunt and peck that much. Outside of oh, I'm doing it within this scale or like this modal sort of thing.
All right, and the final question I want to ask you is I want to talk about like your gear, like what kind of guitars you use, like the strings, pedals, amps, and all that stuff.
Oh, is what I love. The guitar is a Cardinal Instruments East, the one that's the copper top that I've been playing forever. Since 2013. So it's a fellow Sam Evans in Austin, Texas, and he has a small shop. It's just him, and he makes, I don't know how many a year, maybe 20, 25 a year, maybe 20, 25 guitars. And I met him at an amp show in 2010 in Austin. I was there with my buddy Adam at Satellite Amps, helping him exhibit. And this guy walks in, which was Sam. He's holding one of his guitars, which was one of his Zenith models. And it was really unique looking. And we're like, oh, what the heck is this thing? It's kind of cool. And then we struck up a conversation with him. He's like, you want to try it? And so we sat down and played it. And we're like, this feels weird, but in the best possible way. Not weird as in like bad weird, but just like intriguing. Not weird, intriguing. So, we kept, got his card and kept in contact and started, chatting online or whatever. And then developed this friendship. And he offered me, he's like, hey, man, if you'd ever be interested in me building something for you, just let me know. So I was like, you know what? I'd never had a completely, it did not end up being custom because it's, one of his designs, but like a custom, I picked the woods, everything, guitar like that. I'd had other guitars made, but it was more like parts guitars, which were still great guitars, but this was like him hand carving everything and, really total craftsman kind of stuff. So I'd asked him for that, and he came back like 6 months later with a guitar, and I love the guitar. The only thing was I was like, oh man, it's kind of, I don't want to take it on the road, even though I actually have it right now. But I don't want to take it on the road. I'm afraid of anything happening to it. And he's like, okay, well, you know what? I have some stuff in my hidey hole that's like I could, appropriate to what you want. 2 humbuckers, this type of tremolo, these type of pickups, whatever. I can do that for you. And he did it at a fraction of the cost of the other one. Nice. And that's the guitar I've been playing on all recordings and everything since, And it just, we A/B guitars all the time in the studio, and that one always wins, for what I'm doing, for me. So yeah, I've been stuck with that, and I actually not stuck with that, but I've stuck with that because I love his guitars, and I really enjoy playing and repping them and everything like that. They're fantastic instruments. They feel, it's like vintage feel, modern playability. They have the speed of modern instruments, but they have a vintage look and a vintage feel to them. Awesome. They feel broken in. So and I just saw him the other day in Austin, and we have a couple more projects lined out to do new instruments. For amps, I've been using Hiwatt since 2018. That's their high gain model for the Super High 50, and I love that amp. It's clean. It's a clean gain. It gets heavy and punchy. It's super tight. It's angry sounding, very British EL34 amp, but it's not overly saturated to where it's just this like, it doesn't sound like it's bleeding. It's just angry and punchy and gritty and pissed. So I love it, and it's exactly what you put into it comes out of it. So if you're having a great day, you love it. If you're having a bad day, you want to go jump off a bridge. But it's very truthful in how it reflects. It's a mirror basically. It's a mirror amp, and all Hiwatts are like that. Like even though it is higher gain, it still has that Hiwatt signature where it's like, yeah, there's no hiding behind this thing. So you're rewarded if you have a good day, and if you are cursed if you have a bad day. Nice. But so that, and then effects, I've not relied, but I've used more pedals. I used to be just very simple. Like I have a tuner, a wah, a delay in the loop, and a volume pedal. That's it. But now I have like a bunch of like timing pedals. I got Earthquaker devices. I got hooked up with them. I'm using their Astral Destiny. Use that on the record too. I have a Red Panda Context for some cavernous reverb. I have a couple electro harmonics. I have a Pitchfork for like doing drop tune stuff, and I have a Mel 9, which is a lot of the ambient stuff like you're hearing on Terrasite is a Mel 9 pedal.
Oh yeah.
So like the sort of almost human choir voice, and then a lot of like the stringy sound and stuff. That's that. And yeah, I've been using those pedals. I'm probably going to get a Strymon Cloudburst because it sounds incredible. Just from the demos I've heard, that's probably my little thing I'll do for myself. I'll buy one of those. And then, D'Addario strings, my ISP decimator for my noise gates, my Morley pedals for my wah and my volume, those Enki cases, which are great, Celestion speakers in all my cabs, and I don't want to miss anyone. Yeah, I think it's pretty much, Cardinal, High Watt, ISP, Morley, Dava picks. Yeah, Dava picks I've been using since 2007. Awesome picks, great people. I just saw Tim from Dava here. I know there's like buzzing things here.
Awesome.
I know, right? We picked a great place. I saw Tim from Dava maybe a week ago. Those guys have been amazing to me. So, I'm very fortunate to have, I was able to, be associated with people that's not only just like my rep at so-and-so, which they, so-and-so may have like a million people. Like D'Addario, I've been with them forever. And they have a ton of artists, so I don't expect to be like, oh, hey, remember me? But they're awesome. I get my stuff on time. They get my little cutesy artist discount, whatever, great. But so I understand because it's a big string company. But with Cardinal, with High Watt, with any of the smaller companies, you could go up and have how are your kids doing? Or, how's your wife? Or whatever. Just, and they'll ask, how's this and that? What are you doing? How's Berlin? Or whatever. Just personal questions that are like, it's like they become a friend, through that. So it's like, that's wonderful. And I know that's an ideal situation. You're not going to have that just because of the nature of certain business size, and they may have a ton of artists. But, I'm fortunate to have that. And a lot of the people I go with, so it's just, as cheesy and cliche as it sounds, it's like there's a sort of familial element to it, to where you have those relationships. And for gear and all that, not possible all the time, but if I can get it, I'll get it. It's just they're just an email away or a phone call away or text away. And it's
nice.
Always, it's not just, it doesn't go into the email log chain where 6 months later you may hear back because they're just so busy. It's like, not that I demand response immediately, but it's cool. They're just like, oh, hey, man, what's up? Oh, blah, 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 blah. And you can talk about this much about the instrument or whatever you're talking about, and then this much about, like, oh, this really good curry place opened up 2 doors down. Stuff like that, just non-business, quote-unquote, related. So, yeah, it's nice like that. I'm just really fortunate to have a lot of cool people in my gear world.
Awesome. So before we go, I just want to thank you for this interview. Is just anything else with that Cattle Decapitation you'd like to plug for the release of Terrasite?
Yeah, we're out on tour with the Decibel Tour with Dark Funeral, 200 Stab Wounds, and Black Braid until June 10th. We're hitting, right now we're in Atlanta. Tomorrow we have Charlotte, then Baltimore, New York, Montreal, Toronto, back in the States, Detroit, Chicago, Minneapolis, and then we have a day off there. I don't know, but then we're heading back west, maybe Kansas City? I'm not sure. But then Denver, Salt Lake, Vancouver, Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, LA, all winding around. So we're going to be out. And then we just got announced we're going to be in Australia in September. Australia and let's hope New Zealand if we can get that nailed down too. But definitely Australia. And then in November, we're going to be back in the United States doing a headliner. Bands we're kind of trying to get figured out 100% right now, but we'll be doing a headlining set, so we'll probably have like an hour and 15 minutes, a long set, and the full production, everything.
Hope you come back here.
Oh, it's Atlanta. We'll be here. Absolutely.
Fuck yeah.
It's, it'd be silly to skip Atlanta. So, we'll have the full headliner set, and that's starting in November, probably about a 5-week tour, November, December. So we'll be really busy. And then, early next year, Europe in March. And then probably another U.S. tour in the spring.
Nice.
So we got stuff ahead. The European thing is pretty much getting booked right now. The U.S. tour, that's a foggy in the future thing. It's going to happen. We just don't know next year. But excuse me, the one at the end of this year is that's like dates are held and everything like that. We're just trying to get some finishing touches on it.
I'm looking forward
Details,
to that, man.
so yeah.
So everybody, Josh Elmore from Cattle Decapitation. See you next time.